Every once in a while, a country makes a set of quiet, practical decisions that don't look dramatic in the moment until they start reshaping an entire region's economy. That's a good way to describe what Morocco has been doing over the last decade and a half. For a long time, North Africa was widely viewed as an economy built around agriculture, fishing, and tourism. The region exported raw materials and primary goods, Moroccan phosphates, Algerian hydrocarbons, and largely sat outside the world's major manufacturing supply chains. Morocco took a different route. Over the past 10 to 15 years, it has positioned itself as North Africa's first genuinely scaled industrial economy. Today, Morocco is one of Africa's leading automotive manufacturing hubs, producing hundreds of thousands of vehicles a year and ranking among the continent's top car producers. Its flagship port has grown into a global logistics platform that processes close to 10 million containers annually and sits among the world's busiest container ports. Aerospace suppliers have also set up production in Morocco, factories that, in a previous era, might have gone to Eastern Europe, Turkey, or Asia. And this wasn't a lucky accident. Morocco built an economic model around the advantages it could realistically defend: stability, connectivity, and ease of trade. In a region that has often faced shocks and uncertainty, Morocco cultivated a reputation as the predictable option. That doesn't mean growth has been perfectly smooth or evenly shared. Benefits have been concentrated in places and sectors, and not everyone feels the upside immediately, but the big picture trend has stayed consistent, and consistency is exactly what global manufacturers value. So the key questions are straightforward. How did Morocco industrialize so quickly? Why are manufacturers choosing Morocco now instead of other traditional options? And can this momentum scale into something bigger, or will Morocco remain mainly a cost-effective workshop serving Europe? Now, back to Morocco. From the outside, Morocco's industrial rise can look sudden, but the foundation was built deliberately. In the late 2000s, Morocco made a clear strategic pivot. Instead of waiting for foreign investment to arrive naturally, and instead of relying mainly on tourism, agriculture, and low-value-added exports, the country adopted an active industrial policy. Build what global manufacturers need before they show up. That approach started with the emergence strategy, and was later structured through industrial development programs focused on creating full industrial ecosystems, places where factories, suppliers, logistics, and skills are clustered together in the same geography. A core tool was the rollout of dedicated industrial zones with targeted infrastructure, streamlined rules, and direct links into national logistics networks. Over time, Morocco developed a large network of industrial zones spanning thousands of hectares and hosting thousands of firms across manufacturing, logistics, services, and technology. One of the earliest and most influential examples was the Tangier Free Zone, launched in the late 1990s. Over time, it drew in hundreds of companies and substantial investment across sectors like automotive components, aerospace parts, textiles, electronics, and even software and services. Nearby, Tangier Automotive City, opened in the 2000s, expanded into a large automotive ecosystem with a major supplier base and tens of thousands of direct jobs connected to assembly, stamping, wiring, and parts manufacturing. But what truly separates these zones from industrial parks that never scale is one simple factor: logistics. These clusters sit close to one of Morocco's most powerful assets, Tangier Med, now the largest port in Africa and one of the most connected container ports globally. It handles close to 10 million containers per year and links directly to a massive number of ports across dozens of countries. For manufacturers, this matters because it compresses time. Goods can move from factory to ship to European markets quickly and predictably. Many major European ports are only a short sea journey away. That reliability is the difference between we can build here and we can scale here. Across Africa, some industrial zones struggled because they were built too far inland, where long trucking distances, border frictions, and port congestion made timelines unpredictable, especially for industries that depend on just-in-time production. The lesson is clear: low labor costs don't help much if the supply chain is slow, expensive, or unreliable. Morocco took that lesson and designed its industrial map accordingly. Instead of concentrating manufacturing deep inland, it built a coastal industrial corridor, keeping production close to export routes and major ports. Moving south from Tangier, zones like the Kenitra Atlantic Free Zone became another pillar of this strategy, supporting automotive production and supplier networks tied to major assembly operations. Near Casablanca, Morocco developed clusters focused on higher precision industries like aerospace manufacturing. In the north, additional parks expanded light manufacturing, services, and logistics. Taken together, these zones operate like integrated industrial cities. Costs are competitive, administrative processes are simpler, and export workflows are smoother. But the real advantage is the system design: training centers close to employers, suppliers close to assembly. logistics infrastructure built into the layout, and direct highway and rail connections into ports. Once the zone model proved it could attract global players, Morocco shifted from proving the concept to scaling it. Through industrial acceleration programs, especially those rolled out from the mid-2000s onward, the government focused on 3 levers: expanding industrial land and infrastructure, improving incentives and operating conditions, and building workforce pipelines tailored to specific industries. That workforce approach is important. Instead of relying only on general education upgrades, Morocco emphasized training designed around real factory needs: assembly line roles, quality control, aerospace technician skills, and other practical competencies that companies require to scale production. Beyond heavy industry, Morocco also invested in tech and services ecosystems through dedicated campuses and offshoring-friendly environments, pairing plug-and-play facilities with hiring incentives and training support to grow higher-skilled employment. In parallel, Morocco worked to strengthen applied research and advance capabilities through institutions designed to link academia and industry, especially in fields that support long-term competitiveness, such as engineering, data science, renewable energy, agriculture technology, and materials science. And all of this sat on top of a major infrastructure push. Ports were expanded, and additional logistics projects were launched to diversify capacity, reduce bottlenecks, and avoid concentrating the entire system in a single hub. New port and logistics platforms are being developed to relieve pressure on the main gateways and to anchor industrial growth in additional regions. On land, Morocco dramatically expanded its highway network, from a very limited base in the late 1990s to a national system that links industrial zones directly to ports and major cities. That places Morocco among the strongest logistics networks on the continent, and the plan is to keep extending capacity further over the next decade. Rail also improved. A high-speed line connecting key industrial corridors cut travel times sharply and reduced friction for business, labor mobility, and time-sensitive logistics. Expansion plans aim to extend that spine further south, linking more population centers and economic zones into the same fast corridor. Morocco is also upgrading its airports, aiming to expand national capacity, supporting tourism, yes, but also higher value trade, executive mobility, and time-sensitive cargo. Large international events on the horizon add urgency, but the economic logic goes beyond tourism. Next comes the trade layer. Morocco holds multiple free trade agreements, including with the European Union and the United States, plus links to regional partners. For European companies, producing in Morocco can resemble producing near EU in practical terms: lower labor costs and faster permitting, while still benefiting from relatively smooth access into European markets. But Morocco's biggest advantage is one it didn't build: geography. Morocco sits just across the Strait of Gibraltar from Spain. That proximity creates short, secure supply lines into Europe, with shipping routes reaching major European markets much faster than routes from Asia. Combine that with a reputation for political continuity and predictable policy, and Morocco becomes highly attractive for manufacturers who want nearshoring, speed, and reduced risk. In short, Morocco is close to Europe, cost competitive versus Europe, and offers shorter supply chains than Asia, while maintaining a stability premium that matters for long-term factory operations. Even with all these advantages, one constraint can limit any industrial expansion: reliable, affordable electricity. In many parts of the region, power can be costly, inconsistent, or vulnerable to supply issues, problems that can shut down production and break just-in-time models. Morocco moved early to reduce that risk by investing heavily in renewable energy. The sector may still be modest in GDP terms, but it's become strategically important because stable power isn't a nice-to-have for manufacturing. It's a requirement. Over the last 10 years, Morocco has invested more than $360 million into large-scale solar and wind power. The most recognizable example is the Noor complex, an area that used to be empty desert and is now home to one of the world's largest solar installations. It gives Morocco a dependable source of electricity at an industrial scale. Along the Atlantic coast, major wind farms were added as well, feeding power straight into the national grid. For manufacturers, this mattered less as a green headline and more as a practical business advantage. Energy is one of the few major costs that's hard to manage once a factory is built. By improving reliability and reducing exposure to volatile fossil fuel prices, Morocco removed a key uncertainty, making it easier for companies to commit capital, expand operations, and plan for the long term. That said, industrial growth didn't spread evenly across every sector. Morocco attracted manufacturing most strongly in areas where being close to Europe, cost competitive, and operationally predictable delivered the highest returns. The first major winner was automotive. Morocco is now Africa's second largest vehicle producer, assembling more than 550,000 cars per year. It still sits behind South Africa, the continent's traditional automotive hub, but the gap has been narrowing quickly. And while South Africa exports a smaller share of its output, roughly 4/5 of Morocco's production is shipped abroad, mainly to Europe. Renault was among the first major automakers to make a large commitment, opening its Tangier plant in 2012. The site quickly became one of Renault's most efficient facilities, reaching a cumulative output of around 1 million vehicles within a few years and supplying small and mid-sized models directly into European markets. From there, the model scaled. Stellantis opened its Kenitra plant in 2019, producing Peugeot and Opel models for Europe. The site later expanded into electric vehicles, including models such as the Citroën Ami, which helped integrate Morocco into parts of the EV supply chain. Around these assembly plants, tight supplier clusters formed, producing everything from seats and wiring harnesses to dashboards and exhaust systems, often located only minutes from final assembly. That proximity is crucial because modern vehicles contain roughly 15,000 parts. In a fragmented supply chain, every border crossing, customs check, and shipping delay adds cost. Morocco's industrial zones reduce that complexity by keeping more of the value chain close together. Parts are made nearby, assembled nearby, and exported quickly. And as labor costs rise across Western Europe and even parts of Eastern Europe, Morocco has become one of the most cost-effective places to assemble cars at scale on a per-vehicle basis, often competing well against long-established low-cost options like Turkey, Romania, or Mexico. Once Morocco proved it could run complex, just-in-time production for automotive, a second sector accelerated: aerospace. That may sound surprising at first because aircraft manufacturing is typically associated with high-income, high-tech economies. But modern aerospace is highly specialized and distributed. Design and final assembly stay concentrated in places like the US and Europe, while many critical components, such as wiring systems, composite parts, and structural sections, depend heavily on precision, quality control, certification, and reliable logistics. Morocco offered a strong match for that profile. Today, it ranks among the faster-growing aerospace hubs globally, with roughly 150 aerospace companies operating in the country. Suppliers connected to Boeing and Airbus manufacture components and wiring systems. Safran produces engine-related parts and interiors, while firms such as Collins Aerospace and Stelia build interior components, many of which move directly into European production lines. Aerospace exports have now climbed above $2 billion per year, and Morocco has been gradually moving from basic wiring into higher-value aerospace work. Alongside manufacturing, there is another pillar that remains strategically important for Morocco: mining, specifically phosphate rock. Phosphate is the source of phosphorus, a material that modern economies depend on for two essential systems: food and energy. Phosphorus is a key input in fertilizer, and fertilizers support a large share of global agricultural output. Phosphates also matter increasingly for energy storage because they're a core component in lithium iron phosphate, LFP, batteries, which represent a significant portion of the global EV battery market and are used by major manufacturers. What makes phosphate unique is that, unlike many commodities, it has no simple substitute and no scalable synthetic replacement. It can't just be engineered in a lab, it must be mined where it exists. And Morocco holds roughly 70% of known global phosphate reserves, which gives it a major structural advantage. Through the state-linked group OCP, Morocco has built an integrated phosphate ecosystem, from mining to processing to fertilizer manufacturing. OCP is not only one of the world's largest phosphate fertilizer producers, it is also Morocco's largest employers, with around 21,000 workers. This sector functions as a stabilizer for the broader economy, generating export revenue and foreign currency inflows that create room for investment into more complex industries such as advanced manufacturing and technology. In 2020, OCP generated about $5.9 billion in revenue and represented roughly 1/5 of Morocco's total export earnings. And just as Morocco concentrated scale in automotive and aerospace clusters, it also concentrated phosphate-related infrastructure and processing into a major coastal hub, Jorf Lasfar. Over time, it has grown into the world's largest fertilizer production complex, integrating industrial capacity with export logistics. Put together, this is the model Morocco has built: near European manufacturing at scale, supported by increasingly reliable renewable energy, and anchored by a strategic resource that matters for both food security and the energy transition. Which leads to the bigger question: can Morocco continue moving up the value chain, or will it remain primarily a lower-cost extension of European industry? For decades, global supply chains were optimized for one objective: produce at the lowest possible cost, regardless of distance. But recent shocks highlighted the fragility of long, complex supply chains. The pandemic exposed bottlenecks. The war in Ukraine showed how geopolitical disruptions can hit industry quickly. and growing strategic tension around China has pushed resilience higher on the priority list. For Europe, this has strengthened the case for nearshoring, bringing production closer, reducing transit times, and keeping supply chains within politically stable and aligned regions. Morocco fits that shift well. Over the past 2 decades, Morocco has maintained relative political stability, consistent economic policy, and a gradual reform path. While parts of the region experienced major turbulence after the Arab Spring, Morocco largely preserved continuity. Some of that stability is geographic, buffered by mountains, desert, and 2 coastlines, which can reduce spillover from regional shocks. But stability also comes from strategic positioning. Through phosphate exports, Morocco plays a meaningful role in global agricultural systems. And that creates long-term partnerships, especially across parts of sub-Saharan Africa. Equally important, policy change in Morocco has generally been incremental rather than abrupt. Reforms have tended to come step by step, allowing institutions and investors to adapt without constant rule reversals. For manufacturers making multi-billion-dollar decisions, that predictability matters, especially in aerospace, where certification and production planning can span many years. Once a supplier is certified, companies want confidence that the operating environment will remain consistent over the next decade or 2. Still, the model has real constraints. Morocco's industrial momentum depends heavily on European demand, which can soften when EU growth slows. Climate risks matter as well. Recurring droughts increase pressure on agriculture and water systems, and that can affect the wider economy over time. The most important domestic challenge is employment. Despite significant infrastructure and investment, Morocco has struggled to generate enough high-quality jobs for its young population, especially outside major cities. Overall unemployment sits around 13%, and among young people it is far higher. This gap between modernization and inclusion is a central tension. Morocco has built world-class ports, factories, and transport links, but the benefits are uneven. Much of the foreign investment and many higher-value jobs concentrate along the Casablanca-Rabat-Kenitra corridor, while inland and southern regions lag behind. Some analysts describe this as a 2-speed economy, globally connected in certain zones, underemployed and frustrated in others. That tension has periodically surfaced through protests focused on jobs and inequality. For now, stability has largely held. Over the long term, resilience will depend on whether industrial growth translates into opportunity at scale. There's also a longer-run challenge. Morocco is strong in assembly, components, and mid-value manufacturing. That is a major achievement. But sustaining growth over decades usually requires adding more local capabilities, engineering, design, advanced services, and higher skill work embedded in the domestic economy. So Morocco's real test going forward isn't only about exporting more. It's about broadening the employment impact, moving further up the value chain, and ensuring that new opportunities reach well beyond the main industrial corridors.